Chapter 1, An Unexpected Faith. I lived during a time when people were appreciative of the same values that we had: God, family, country, and career. And I always knew that I wanted to marry a man who was a Christian, even though I did not come from a Christian home. And yet, my mother was one of the first in my life to introduce me to God. When I was 44 years old, my mother told me about an occasion that I never knew about. I was visiting her in Buna, Texas, and we were sitting on the rocking chairs on the front porch just talking. She suddenly said, "Gladys, you know, when you were a baby, even before you could walk or talk, I read the Bible to you. I didn't know where to start, so I just started at the beginning, and I would just go straight through." I don't know if she got to the end of Revelation or not, but that was the path she was on. And she said, my sisters would laugh at me and say, "Hey, she's just an infant. Why aren't you reading a nursery rhyme book to her?" But she didn't pay any attention to them. She just kept on reading the Bible to me. Remember, I'm 45 years later now from the baby that she read the Bible to. And when she told me that story, it was a gift of God, because I always wondered as a child and as a woman why I had such a desire to want to know God. And it goes back to my mother reading the Bible to me, even though I was not aware of it. What would make my mother want to do that? I recently found the answer to that. The culture was different then. My mother lived in Whitwell, Tennessee, and the area was filled with hundreds of churches and several Bible colleges. The culture prepared a statement to the population: God is important and you need him in your life. In some cases, parents may not have been Christians, but they wanted their kids to be, so they would drop them off at church. And because of that, my mother was able to pass a Christian heritage on to me, even though she was not claiming to be a Christian at the time. Both my mom and dad came to Christ later in life and are in heaven now, and what a blessing that was. But back to the beginning. I was born in 1942. Oh yes, I know that was a long time ago. World War II was raging, and my father was a sharpshooter in the Army. His unit trained sharpshooters. And when they went overseas to war, my father remained back to continue to train sharpshooters. Everyone in his unit who went to war was killed in action, and he carried a survivor's guilt for the rest of his life. And he did his part training the sharpshooters, but he still felt he should have been there to fight the fight. I was such a daddy's girl. I looked up to him and was so proud of him. He was tall, dark, and handsome. And he loved to deer hunt, and he was a truck driver at one point, and he worked as a lumberjack at one point, and then went on to be an iron worker and a welder. In fact, in early 1960s, he worked on the Humble Oil Building in Houston, Texas. That building is 44 floors and was the tallest building west of the Mississippi at that time. He would sit on the top floor, dangle his feet off, and eat his lunch. In fact, he almost got killed a couple of times up there. God spared him. Later on in life, my dad opened up a welding shop right next door to our house, and he got really creative with his welding and made tables and chairs and coffee tables, and he ran that business right there out of his yard. Because my dad had different jobs, we moved around a lot, and in 1955, we moved from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Augusta, Georgia. At that time, they were building what was called the Savannah River Bomb Plant, and it was a big deal. My dad was a welder, so he wanted to get in on that. And when we moved there, we lived in Robbins Trailer City, and there must have been 100 trailers that looked exactly like sardine cans on their side. It was me, my dad, my mom, and my brother, who was 3 years younger than I. After a while, Dad bought a trailer for us to live in and parked it across the street from a big 2-story farmhouse in Augusta, Georgia on Oak Street. I was 12 years old with a ponytail and red shorts running around the yard. I had a little Cocker Spaniel named Peaches that would always follow me at my heels. And Joe noticed me that day, the first day I was there, And he would cut the grass right in front of our yard where we lived. And he had a big farmyard. And he would stop the tractor in that spot across from our trailer, come over and talk to me. And he spent a lot of time over there talking to me. One day my daddy, who saw me as a little girl, said, "What's that old boy doing over here?" Joe saw me as a nice young woman, but my dad didn't figure that out right away. It's still amazing to me that he didn't. Eventually, Joe and I got married, but before that, when he was 17 and I was 13, he joined the Air Force and went off to San Antonio, and that was when I realized that I really missed him.